Lord Jesus Christ, thank you for your love for us and kindness to us. Thank you for walking with us and caring for us. Help us to keep in step with you as we walk. And we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen. So every mom has her funny little quirks. In my experience, Dad's quirks are a little easier to find. Bad jokes, strong opinions about insignificant things, dress socks with shorts. Those are Dad quirks. Mom quirks are a little easier, a little harder to look for. In my life, Susan McDonald is one of the classiest people I know. You'd be hard-pressed not to find her collected, centered, and ready for everything. Needless to say, that's why my life is very much the same. And one of the few quirks in my mom's life that I finally found and noticed over the years used to come when we'd leave the house. I'd get all packed up for college, all shiny up for a date, and Mom in house coat and slippers would run out the door and go, "Do you need this? I've got this. Josh, son, do you need this?" A blank piece of notebook paper, a box of raisins, a jacket in the middle of August. These are the items that Mom would be waving. Do you need this? Do you need this? A pair of moon boots, a roll of quarters, a hastily thrown together ham sandwich. No, Mom, I do not need that. Do you need this? Do you need this? I'm just going out. I'll see you at dinner. I'm just going to work. I'll see you at quitting time. I'm just going to college. I'll see you at Christmas. Do you need this? A left-handed glove, a purple thumbtack, a roll of paper towels. No, Mom, I do not need that. And it irritated me at the time, of course, but now I miss it. And there are plenty of times in my adult life, in the weird and scary anxiety of being an adult, that I wish someone would run out and make sure my lunch was packed. Because that is life. This is Mama's love. This is Mama's love. And that's all it was in the end. She just wanted to see us one last time. Just wanted to make that last bit of connection. Do you need this? Do you need this? Before the three of us, my brother and my sister and I, tore down the road back into our busy lives. And now I understand a little bit more that I have kids of my own. The days are very, very long, but the years fly by. Mom's love. Something to reflect on Mother's Day. When I think of my mom's love in my life, I think of her running out to bring us one last thing. This love that cut through moments. I'm on my way to prom, college, grad school, seminary. Mom! This fiercely protective love that God has built into mamas. And for Mama, the kids are the main priority and the rest of the world can take a number. Mom will rock right out in the middle of whatever situation, house coat, curlers and all, if it means protecting, loving, or spending one last moment with her little ones. And I think of the time we were in a restaurant and the lady at the table next to us told us that my kids were being too loud and they were ruining her dinner. And Heather got the crazy eye. Calm down, ma'am. Back away. Heather had a very classy reaction in which she informed this lady that restaurants are public places, kids make noise, and there were a lot of other tables she could sit at if she'd like to. And that is what her reaction was. Could have been worse. Anyway, so is the kind of case with our passage today. We see mom's love. Mom's love slicing through cultural barriers, awkward situations for the love of her little one. And we see Jesus interacting with a mom who is desperate and appreciating this fierce love she has for her daughter. We see Mom running out in her house coat and bunny slippers. We see Mom saying, "Hey, restaurants are loud, kids are loud. There's a lot of other tables you can sit at if you want." Amen. And one of the old theological statements that they used to say about a real figure who could stand up against a lot of people was that he stood up in Latin, it'd say contra mundum. They would say Josh contra mundum or John contra mundum. Contra mundum means against the world. And so in that sense we have Mom contra mundum. And that's what she does sometimes. Mark 7, verse 24 through 30. Mark 7, verses 24 through 30. I promised you guys we'd get out of John. So we did. Not very far out of John. Mark 7, 24 through 30. And from there he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and did not want anyone to know, and yet he could not be hidden. And immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and came and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." And she answered him, "Yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "For this statement you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter." And she went home and found the child lying in bed, and the demon gone. Behold, one of the most difficult passages in the Gospels. I just thought I'd do a fun one today since it's a holiday, so there you go. Let me set the scene for you. Jesus is in Tyre and Sidon, a region north of Jerusalem, and he's there during the Passover feast. So this is the time of year when everybody, especially male Jewish observant people, were on their way back to Jerusalem for the Passover. Required feast of observance for being a Jewish person. And Jesus is taking his apostles and going north. So he's going against traffic. They're all coming here, he's going that way. He's essentially up in Tyre and Sidon so that he can rest. He has been in constant ministry, constant giving, constant depletion. He is resting and recouping. In a sense, he's almost hiding. And in the middle of that, this mother finds him. We have to look at what's going on. He's staying in a house in this region. We don't know whose house it is. It's probably someone who's not Jewish. Probably someone who's a Gentile, meaning that Jewish people are not supposed to stay at his house. They don't stay at each other's houses. This is already kind of an out-of-the-box kind of situation. There's already some awkward things going on. And part of the issue here is that woman comes right over a bunch of different barriers of culture, walks into this person's house where Jesus is already out of place, and then she throws herself at his feet. Which is very similar to what the woman did when she wiped his feet with her hair.
Yes. Amen.
And these things are very inappropriate for a woman to do in that culture. Very inappropriate for her to do that. Very embarrassing. Everybody would have covered their mouths. What's going on? And Jesus says the strangest words to her. And that's what makes this such a difficult passage. Jesus uses an ethnic slur to refer to her. He calls her a dog. And why in the world would Jesus say that to somebody being Jesus? And it makes it a difficult passage. So scholars are all over the map on this one. It's interesting to try to find out the best way to go with it. Trying to figure this out is one of few reliable headaches in the Gospels, and there are acres of papers written on it by seminarians and Bible students trying to show off. Don't worry, I'm not going to try to crack the whole code for you today. But it's in Scripture and therefore needs to be studied. It is included in the Word of God, even though we don't quite know where to put it. It's there. And it tells us something about God's character. That's why he put it in there. And so our title for today, Grace Crumbs, a sermon for Mother's Day. That's a picture of my mom? No. Yeah, she would hurt me if she knew I said that. So. But I want to talk to you about the 3 R's of this passage today. The 3 R's of this passage. That's much more a picture of my mom. On the phone, on the phone, on the phone, on the phone, on the phone. Oh, well, I'll be praying for you, honey. Mm-hmm. Oh, mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Heather says she doesn't have any childhood memories of her mom without her ironing and on the phone. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I get you. Ah, that's Wisconsin, you know. Oh, I'm going to the game, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, we're having brats and cheese curds over here, yeah. So anyway, there she is, the 3 R's. Rest, run in, and reality. Rest, run in, and reality. So first of all, rest. Rest. This is Maryland, so...
I remember those days.
Yes. Got those grandkids, and then just adopt a few more while things are going. So we have to take a look at where Jesus is in Tyre and Sidon. As I said, he's throwing off convention here, going north when everyone else is going south. And he is resting. And that rest is part of things. The rest was built into the plan. He only had so many years to do what he did. He only had so much time to get it all done, and he built rest into that. It's not the first time we've run into rest as a theme in Jesus' life and a part of God's life in general. The pinnacle of creation is not the flying fish and the parrots and even mankind. The pinnacle of creation is the Sabbath, when God rested. When God rested. And I think of that in my relationship with my kids. I provide for them, I feed, clothe, shelter them, I take them to the doctor, I take them to the dentist, I take them to school. But if I do not rest with them, I do not have a relationship with them. If I don't rest with them, I'm not their father. And if I don't take time to do pointless things like building Lego towers or making mud pies, then I'm not really dad. It's that time of rest that God built into us. Rest on many different levels. The rest for most of us, I know especially for myself, rest is always tinged a little bit with guilt. I should be doing something. I should be getting something done. Why am I resting? When the real work is the rest itself. Restoration, vital to getting anywhere. I want to spend all my time with my kids that I can, but if I don't take some time for me and Heather, and if I don't take some time for just me and God, then I'm not giving them very much of myself at all. I'm not restoring. And we see Jesus doing that all the time. It'd be interesting just to go through and see how many times they catch him asleep or they catch him going off on his own. He went up on the mountain to pray. He probably went up on the mountain to take a nap too. I would guess that, absolutely. So we see Jesus doing that. We see the rest of his community working hard to do their observance, identity, ritual of Passover. The whole year would have built up to that, and this is when the time that Jesus leaves and turns it all off. So rest was built in from the beginning. Rest is part of who we are. And if you've never had a kid do that with your eye, it's a particular kind of aggravating blessing. Anyway, the run-in. Even during this rest, Jesus gets found out. This woman comes and lays herself down at his feet. And again, this is wildly inappropriate. For her to be that familiar with a rabbi, a teacher in the community, was very, very inappropriate. There were certain ways you approached a rabbi, certain ways you talked to them, and she just threw it all off. She jumped across all of them because of the love and desperation she has for her daughter. And so here she is in her housecoat and slippers running out to disturb everything, and Jesus' answer to her is one of the greatest riddles in the Gospels. Verse 26. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter, and he said to her, let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. So what is going on here is that Jesus is using the word that Israelites used for people who were Gentile. Dog. Those people had words for the Israelites that weren't very nice either. It was going both ways, absolutely. This is not just a matter of different races that are different. There is animosity and separation between these people. And it's mostly based on their faith. And Jesus uses this word for this woman, dog. He actually uses the word for her daughter. He talks about her daughter here, and so he uses the word little dog. And there are a number of ways that people have tried to sort of smooth this over and match it up with the rest of what we know about Jesus. Now one of the ways is to say he uses this word little dog, which means puppy. So instead of the derisive word dog, which means a mangy scavenger, what he means is something like puppy. That sort of ties it with a little bit too easy of a bow. You haven't been in the Bible very long if you think things are that easy to tie up. Sorry, Dad, I learned that from him. I don't agree with it. Anyway, the other way is on the other extreme, which I find greatly troubling theologically. This position here that Jesus They believe that Jesus is acting out of prejudice, that he's being pig-headed, and he's doing something wrong here, and this woman is teaching him about loving people. That's a problem with your theology. If you think Jesus is God and that what he does is right and perfect and we should be like him, grab one thing, you lose a lot of other things. Both of these answers are problems. Both of these answers don't take into account a very big picture, and they also try to answer too many questions. If your theology is trying to answer too many questions, pull back, pull back, pull back, pull back, pull back, pull back. Don't do that. Keep it simple, that's the rule.
Yes.
The fact is that Jesus uses an ethnic slur. He referred to this woman the way the rest of the Israelites referred to those people. And our understanding of Jesus is that he was to take down that wall between Israel and the rest of the world.
Amen.
Much of the ink in the Bible is spilled saying just that. So why would Jesus use these words? And on the one hand, you have the answer that he used the word puppy. Puppy. Sorry, calling someone a dog or a little dog, not that much difference there. Still a problem. At least still a problem with me. I'm going to call my kids a little dog, we'll have a conversation. It might be outside. Anyway, sorry. On the other hand, you have this idea that Jesus is learning something, and that ends up being a big problem theologically. We don't know, what we know about Jesus is that that's not going to happen. So I'm going to attempt to chase down an answer here, and I don't know if the New Testament scholars out there are going to come after me, so nobody turn me in. So between you guys and me, all right? Are we cool?
Yeah.
All right. Good. Good, good, good. Jesus says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. And Matthew's telling us this story, that is his first answer to her. I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. We have to look at the big picture. Jesus is talking about the lost sheep of Israel, which points to the grand plan God had in sending Jesus. We have to remember that he didn't come as some sort of universal figure who was like an alien and just said things in this big announcer voice. He came as a first century Jewish guy. A Jewish kid with strong Hebrew eyebrows, knobby knees, and chicken legs. He came with all that. All of the parts of being human, a particular person, particular culture, and a particular day. He was wearing the garb of a first century Israelite, which meant a lot of things. It meant he would go to temple every time he turned around, and even though he knew everything was going to change, he still kept those traditions. He still kept Sabbath for most of his life. He constantly brought in that he wasn't there to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, to bring about what it was trying to bring. And he brought that about in himself. He was completing that story, building on the story that was already there. And in some sense, this is a reaction that any Gentile would expect in this case. Any Gentile woman, she was probably gearing herself up for that kind of reaction. It wouldn't have been out of place at all. There's really nothing out of place about it, except that it's Jesus, and he's always a little bit out of place. He's building on the foundation and the story that's already there, but he's always building out from it. He's always building out from it. He adds to it, he changes, he tweaks it. Just something he does all the way through the Gospels, from not observing the Sabbath on a particular day to trashing the temple. He's always doing something that takes him one step beyond, and yet there are times when he seems to observe these things. And he tells the leper, go to the priest and get the ritual done now that you've been healed. And I think what we have to look here is this is a heavily contextualized situation. This is a situation that is hard for us to exactly relate to. Jesus is not only taking on the clothing and the costume of the first century Jew, he is even taking on their cultural tensions here. When Jesus touches on what seems like such a strange comment is actually the larger picture of what God is up to. And it draws an important distinction for us. Jesus was sent to the lost sheep of Israel first. The plan was to come through Israel and out to the rest of the world. It's an important part of space-time history, not a bit of abstract theology. Jesus was not here just to do good things for people. Not just to be nice and teach other people how to be nice. But to bring the plan of God to its fulfillment. And in this instance, Jesus is not here to do miracles for everyone who walks in. And you may notice that he doesn't. Certainly there were a lot of sick people around. It was the first century. You lived to be about 40, and life was pretty hard most of the time. There were a lot of people he could have healed, and he didn't. He didn't. If we look at the places where Jesus does miracles, we see them tied into the story. He heals a man with a withered hand to teach a lesson about the Sabbath. He multiplies the food for the 5,000 to teach a lesson about Passover. It's all tied within the greater story. The miracles are part of the story, and the miracles were not the point of the story. So we don't see Jesus just walking around zapping people. At least that we have any record of. They were part of his intentional plan, just as sure as his time of resting was part of his intentional plan. Now, I know I've told you guys some stories before about when I worked in state government. It was 8 terrifying months of working in the state government of Kansas. If you ever worked in government before, you know it is a highly regulated place with titles and hierarchy and a big picture that is all coming together, and you are part of it. And there are important lines that you do not cross, very important things you don't do that fit into that larger picture. I worked under a deputy secretary who was a friend of mine who I'd known for years, and I called him Deputy Secretary. And he worked under someone I called Mr. Secretary, and they work under someone we called Mr. Governor. And you called them by their title. There was nothing personal about that, it was just part of the picture. For me to just go in and be like, hey Pedro, hey Rob, what's up guys? Would have broken down that bigger picture. Would have broken down the larger version. There's a reason things were in the place they were in. In a sense, I think that's what we have here with Jesus and this woman. Eventually, yes, the Spirit and the message and the grace are going out to all people. That was part of what was happening. But Jesus is staying with the plan here. I am sent to the lost sheep of Israel. He's not letting someone else run it. He knows the vision. He knows what he's about. And he pushed this lady back very strongly. And he's not going to just do miracles just to do them. And that brings us into some of the greater message of the gospel. People think that you can scrub out the strangeness of the gospel, the uniqueness of the gospel story, and come up with simply loving each other and giving good hugs. And there are churches this morning who are getting together for worship to talk about loving people and doing nice things for people, and not the gospel. And Jesus stands up against that here, saying, no, this is part of a story. It's not just me doing tricks for you. It's part of the story. So you have some churches that focus only on that, and that is unfortunate. And Jesus is stating here that I'm not just about healing people, I'm about the salvation of humanity.
Yes, amen.
And our culture right now, although much of it's not outright anti-religious, does love to tell us, these religious people, poor religious people, pat on the head, all your religions are the same, everybody get along. You all believe the same thing. Said as any non-religious person would say it. And we have to say no.
Amen.
It's not the truth. Doesn't mean we're not going to be kind. Doesn't mean we're not going to be understanding, but that is not the truth.
Yes.
Jesus came with a particular plan in mind. And the world and God's relationship with humanity coheres better than that. Jesus goes back to the vision that he had and his run-in with this woman. She's coming in a crazy way, breaking down all these rules and kind of blowing his cover. And Jesus took on the role he did for a reason. And very soon in the Gospel of Mark, the announcement will come that the gospel is for all peoples, as a Roman centurion stands up and says, surely this is the Son of God. Or in the old movie, it's John Wayne saying, surely this is the Son of God. And in the book of Mark, it's the outsiders who get it first. The insiders are the ones who don't get it. The outsiders are the ones who approach Jesus and start to see what's going on. And that brings us to the reality. The reality. As for the actual exchange, it's interesting. Again, people try to solve this in a lot of ways. Jesus says, let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. And why exactly he used this word dog is something I think we'll have to take up with him when we see him.
Amen.
For sure. To find out exactly what's going on. I think we have to look at this metaphor that dogs eat eventually. Jesus is framing a different kind of metaphor. He's taking that the children of Israel eat first. He came first to them, which is what happened. and the crumbs fell to everyone else, which is us. Jesus came to Israel first. But we still don't know exactly why he would choose such an offensive word to talk to somebody. It's interesting, though, her answer, that she goes round for round with him. She sort of gets back into this back and forth with him. Jesus uses the dog metaphor. She answers with the same metaphor. Jesus sees that, and he is struck by it. He must have had some sort of facial expression or something in his tone that told her this conversation is not over. Because it really usually would have been. I'm not here for you. Goodbye. But something drew her back into the conversation, and she stayed with him. A specific vision, a specific mission that he won't be taken away from. But things have changed now. And he can speak to her with dignity and grace and love. And she continues back and forth with him. And that's part of Mom's love here. She is sharply insulted, but continues on in her housecoat and curlers saying, no, my kid needs something. My kid needs something. And when my kids need something, then forget everything else. Jesus sees her love in her face. He sees the image of God glowing within her despite their separation. Despite her own expectations of him, which are murky and strange at best. He sees what's going on. And that's the reality. That is the reality of grace, the reality of Christ. And that is where the grace crumbs fall.
Amen.
If there are grace crumbs to be had, and there always are, Mama knows where to look for them. Mama knows how to cut across our pretension and self-preservation and speak from her heart to our heart. And in this case, from her heart to God's heart. And when it comes to her kids, Mama's not afraid to get down on the ground and look for what crumbs she can.
Amen.
And in a sense, this is a place where Mama's love caused God to change his mind. Think about that for a second. He didn't change his mind. He had a plan. I know. But think about how it looks. That's how fierce her love is. And that's how much Jesus respects him. Because of her love, he's able to play dumb, allow himself to enter into the conversation. We see this in another place where Jesus makes wine at a wedding because Mom told him to go to a miracle. And he says, it's not time, Mom. But he goes and does it anyway. We see grace crumbs all over, grace crumbs everywhere. Jesus is constantly breaking the rules, constantly stepping out of what he came to step into. And that is the reality. And that is the change. And I think of when I was in state government, and the guy who was over me, deputy secretary, very serious, very scary, he had a Bolivian accent. And every time I hear a Bolivian accent, and he got fired, which was kind of pleasant, actually. He got fired. I went in to see his replacement the next day, and I said, excuse me, deputy secretary. And the guy, I can tell you what he was wearing, how he was sitting. That's how it stayed with me. I said, excuse me, Deputy Secretary. He turned around and he said, good morning, my name is Gary. Josh, my name is Gary. This is different. Jesus had to step in a certain culture at a certain time to do things in a certain way, and yet there are the crumbs all over the place. Grace crumbs all over, left and right. So what are your grace crumbs today? What is the trail of crumbs that you are following today? God has a great plan for all things and all people. That there are times when it seems to make no sense. There are times when he seems to insult us right to our face. And there are times when we get glimpses of how the plan comes together. But usually not. Usually not. And we are left insulted. And those times we can learn from this mom who scraped and scrambled and prayed and entreated and beat the heavens until the grace crumbs fell. We look for grace crumbs, and she took what she could get. And God honored that. I don't pretend to have this exchange entirely tied with a bow. One of few things I'll be asking Jesus when I see him. But the cool thing is, when I do ask him, this woman will be right there, and I can talk to her about it. Amen. And so will her daughter. Amen. And so will so many other people. Amen. And by then, I'll be in the presence of Christ and know that he had the best in mind. So 3 things today. 3 things today. There you go. Jesus built rest into his plan. Rest is a spiritual discipline and among the most neglected.
Amen.
Jesus had 3 years to demolish and restore humanity and took time to rest several times within there.
Yeah.
And when it comes to Mother's Day, we need to give our ladies rest. Whether they are biological mothers, church mothers, or both.
Amen.
We need to focus on them for a while. Mama gives so much, more output than any of us can imagine. What can we do to focus back on her and make her rest if we have to? In our family, we do Mom's afternoon off every Friday. Sometimes I have to chase Heather out of the house. Go, get. Fortunately, my wife knows herself well enough to know what she needs. Time at the coffee shop doing her art. Time to see some awful chick movie. That kind of thing. These are things that seem small, but they make all the difference. And our Savior modeled resting for us. The run-in. Mama crashes in, her curlers falling out, her bunny slippers coming off, and throws herself down on the floor. And she stops it all. And Jesus stops with her. And that's one of the most amazing gifts I've ever seen in motherhood with my wife and our kids. I get in the mode of, okay, bedtime, eat time, playtime, discipline time, whoosh, clean time, bedtime, repeat. Heather can stop on a dime and say, wow, good job. Or she can get in a tickle fight, or tell them a story, or listen to one of their stories. No. She can just stop and do that. It's amazing. It's amazing. And Jesus says, hey, I'm here for the lost sheep of Israel, but let's stop this whole thing.
Yes.
Stop with me. And he models more than once that he can stop everything. Who touched me? And a whole crowd of people, who touched me? He stops it all. Just like Mom does, because he made that mother's love.
Yes.
The other point on that run-in to remember is that Jesus came with a particular vision and mission in mind. He didn't come just to do nice things for people and encourage everyone to get along. He came to bring about redemption and the strange and beautiful story of the resurrection. And we have service and we have love to give. And we have a story to tell. And we need to intertwine the two and hold those realities together. The reality. Josh, my name is Gary. Thinking about this sermon got me thinking about the different times that Jesus was disturbed on his way somewhere. When the woman touched the hem of his robe. When Mary asked him to do a miracle at the wedding even though it wasn't time yet. When the blind man kept yelling, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Right when Jesus is in the middle of everything else. Most of the gospel stories we have are of interruptions. Most of the gospel stories we have are of interruptions. And what reveals someone's true character is when you catch them off guard. And what happens, right? And most of the stories we have are of Jesus being caught off guard. Almost across the board. Absolutely. In these interruptions we see who he really is. Who God really is. He steps across those ancient cultural divides and says, who touched me? And he's the one on the floor with us at the end of the day.
Thank you, Lord.
Looking for the grace crumbs. So amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you for your love for us, your kindness to us. Help us to keep looking for that light that quote-unquote accidentally comes through, because it always does. And it is so hard to hide from. Help us not to hide from it today. Help us to look for your grace crumbs that are being spilled left and right, that we may